Hello, Waswere here, back with another video, and today we're going to be talking about Necromancy. The Necromancy release has left us with a combat style that is very powerful and outclassing everything else in the game, but at the same time feels very unfinished. Which I guess is something you could have expected, as it gives Jagex time to release content going forward, especially filling out levels 99 to 120, as they are basically empty at this point. Starting off, I want to talk a bit about why Necromancy feels this way and why I don't think it has as long as a shelf life as the other combat styles, and it comes through in four main ways. First off, the damage bands for Necromancy abilities are considerably tighter, meaning there is less hitting high or hitting low. As an example, the Necromancy basic attack hits between 90 to 110%, while a similar damaging ability from another style, such as Sever, deals between 37 to 188% damage. This means that rotations are more consistent and you are less likely to need an additional ability at the end of your rotation because you hit low, or you have to cut off your rotation a little bit early because you hit very high. Secondly, there is little RNG when it comes to the actual ability rotations. Other styles have the critical adrenaline buff that changes the adrenaline that you have available based on how much you crit, changing your rotations every single time. Necromancy has none of that. The only ability with any sort of resource system RNG is the Spectral Sight ability, which has a 25% chance to generate a soul on each hit, but as we'll see later on in this video, this ability is rarely used and probably needs a change. The third point is that rotations are easily transferable from boss to boss. Its level of complexity is pretty low, meaning that I can do the Razio rotation at almost every boss in the game and have a similar strong damage, while the other styles you're changing up the order of all your abilities based on the boss and what it does. And lastly, this is I think a little bit smaller, but there is no gear variety, so all your presets end up looking the same. It's a small thing, but I think it makes a big difference in the end. This video will go through 5 ideas that I've come up with that will help alleviate this samey feeling. It was expected, again, that this combat style was not going to be complete on release, but I hope over the next 6 months throughout the whole Necromancy season, they will be able to fill out the skill and make it feel a lot better to use and feel like a complete skill and combat style. The first idea is something that Jagex has already teased, the 4th Conjure. At level 106, we unlock the ability to have 4 active Conjures at once, but there's only 3 currently in the game, which means it's reasonable to expect that we will get a 4th Conjure soon, though they have said that it hasn't even been designed yet. It's all just concept background work at this point. With Vorkath potentially being the new boss in December, I think that a Dragon Conjure Codex would be really cool to use. And with Vorkath's background, we would likely want it to have some sort of interactions with Necrosis stacks, as that fits that boss pretty well. For the passive, I suggest that we add some RNG to the Necrosis resource system. With every critical hit, 1 Necrosis stack is gained. This makes managing and properly taking advantage of your Necrosis stacks to be more difficult, while rewarding the players who do it optimally on the fly. Its command ability links the 2 additional resource systems together by converting all your Necrosis stacks to residual souls at a ratio of 3 to 1. Again, this creates a new way to generate and spend resources, and while I don't think this is very powerful, it could potentially see uses in rotations where you want very quick soul generation. The next 2 ideas are going to be style-specific uniques that are getting backfilled. Necromancy does not have a lot of style-specific uniques beyond the base armor and weapons, leaving a ton of potential for future gear out there over the next couple years. But we're going to start off here with rings. The Vrex Matriarchs released 4 best-in-slot rings, with 1 for each style and then a hybrid ring. But now that there is a 4th combat style, another ring is needed. For gear variety, I would want this ring to be best in slot whenever you don't have 100% accuracy, and then when you do have 100% accuracy, the Reaver's ring can pull back ahead. This creates different setups at different bosses. The Ring of Souls would give plus 1% critical chance per Conjure spawned, giving up to 4% when all 4 are active. Alongside that, it has a passive that whenever a Conjure attacks, there is a 5% chance of generating a residual soul. This would be about 3 to 4 residual souls generated per minute passively if all the conjures are attacking your main target. This again adds a level of RNG with the resource system that requires players to adjust on the fly to the abilities in front of them and make the best of either good RNG or bad RNG. And with a 5% number, the variance on that is going to be quite high, meaning some kills you'll get no souls, and some kills you'll get 5 souls in a minute. Raksha boots are another instance of items being released for each style, and one is now needed for Necromancy. Typically, these boots change how a singular ability works in order to make that ability better and part of rotations. I think the perfect ability for this is Blood Siphon. It's a great ability in AoE AFK training situations, but once you start bossing with Necromancy, you basically forget this ability exists. I think it's been over 2 weeks since I last even activated the ability. The Blood Pact boots would add an additional effect to the ability, fitting the theme of Raksha boots, where in its AoE hits, it also hits the main target for 54 to 66% Necromancy damage over the 4 hits, with those hits healing the player and adding the total damage as it normally works in AoE scenarios. If it's fully channeled for the 4 hits, that would be a total of 538% Necromancy damage to the main target on average, and likely always going to be a full heal. With this, I worry a little bit about Switchcape, as people are going to want to have access to both sets of boots at the same time. But because Blood Siphon has a 45-second cooldown, I think a singular switch of boots is fine. You put on the boots for the Blood Siphon ability, and then you swap back to your boots to make sure your conjures are dealing at maximum damage. This could potentially make it into boss rotations and could be used on the fly in a tough spot to get a full heal when you're out of food or very low HP. One glaring thing that is missing from the Necromancy combat style is an EOF swap. I know, Switchcape. But I think having to decide which one to bring and or swap between 2 EOFs is perfectly fine and not overly cumbersome. It only really gets out of hand when you have 4 to 5 EOFs like range currently does. At that point, it becomes very overwhelming to deal with. Additionally, the other EOF spec weapons, the Death Guard, interacts with necrosis stacks, so I thought it would be good to have one that interacts with residual souls. My idea with this is that instead of consuming the resources like the Death Guard special attack, it would interact with the resources but not use those souls, as the souls are very valuable with the big damaging ability of Volley of Souls. So this EOF spec would almost kill Volley of Souls if it spent all the souls you had stored up. It would deal 225 to 275% ability damage, and then an additional 25% for each residual soul saved up. This way you can get your souls and then use the EOF special attack before dumping all the souls with Volley. Ideally, if balanced right, some bosses there wouldn't be enough time or adrenaline to get the combo off, and you would just volley right away. And other bosses, you have a little more setup time to prepare that rotation, and then you can use the EOF spec prior to the Volley of Souls, creating a little bit of rotational variety with the Necromancy combat style. Those are 4 new items or abilities that I think could really help the higher end of players with Necromancy. But to round out this video, I want to propose changing a current ability because, well, this current ability is pretty tragic. The Spectral Scythe ability is really bad. Not only does it cost adrenaline, it also does less average damage than the Necromancy auto attack, only has a 25% chance to generate a residual soul, and forces you to stand within 2 squares of your target, which sometimes can be a huge detriment. Some changes for this ability. The first cast of the ability is now free to use, and it deals 126 to 154% damage to the main target. This is more than the generic Necromancy basic, but the downside is that there is no adrenaline gained or a guaranteed resource such as a residual soul, as you only have a 25% chance of generating one if you only hit the main target. This would have a cooldown of 15 seconds that starts on the first cast. The second cast of the ability now hits the main target twice instead of once, with the second hit dealing the same 126 to 154% damage. This increases the Necromancy damage to a point where the second ability might be worth the 20% adrenaline cost. It currently really isn't. However, there aren't really any changes needed to the third cast of the ability. It's a really damaging hit for 30%, and it has a cool little passive that you want to use it at the end of fights as it increases the damage dealt there. I think these changes has the potential to make Spectral Scythe be an important part of your Necromancy rotation, as you would maybe try to get one off before your first Living Death cast, instead of completely forgetting that the ability exists right now. Overall, the goal of this video and the items I proposed is not to impact the floor of Necromancy, as I'm sure a lot of less skilled players are enjoying all the new content they can do, but it's to increase the ceiling for the more experienced players that are bound to get bored of Necromancy pretty quickly. I've already seen countless players on the high end stating their dissatisfaction with the style, and I hope that Jagex listens and tries to give a little more to those players without impacting the everyman, as Necromancy is designed for the everyman in mind. If you have any additional ideas, leave them as a comment down below. I'd like to see what y'all can cook up. If you enjoyed the video, consider dropping a like. Really helps out the video's discovery, especially a talking head video like this one where it's not going to be very searchable. Really appreciate it. And as always, subscribe if you want more content in the future. But past that, have a good day, and I'll catch you in the next one.